Yes, welcome into the camp. Badgers had Thursday off. They're back on the field for practice here on Friday. We're not there because it's not open to the media. But the fan practice is open tomorrow, and then obviously they will close out their time in Platteville on Sunday night with what we expect to be a scrimmage, and we will be back after that to talk more about that. But today, I thought we would get into some of your fan questions. We're going to do a Friday mailbag, as we did last week, and answer everything that you guys are wondering about. I know Jesse also has his mailbag up on The Athletic, published this morning. I'm sure there's just as many good questions in there, probably a lot better answers than you're going to get from me, but that's why I got Jesse. He's going to give you all the great answers. Before we get to that, we are brought to you in part by Home Field, the official apparel sponsor of the camp. They've got the absolute best vintage college gear that you're looking for, and today is the big day. It's the beginning of their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign, which includes these platinum football boxes that have these three never-before seen designs, including for Wisconsin. And here's some of the designs. If you're with us on YouTube, you can see them now. That goes on sale today. That's not just the designs, though. You also get these socks, this really cool hat, and a koozie as well for your tailgate. So, again, Home Field is certainly where we go for the best stuff that you can get in terms of vintage college gear, and they got those boxes on sale today. You can find more information up on homefield.com and use the promo code Bucky24 for 15% off your first purchase. All right, Jesse, how you doing?
Doing good. You, Zach?
Are you? I'm doing great. We're getting towards the end of going back and forth to Platteville, only a couple more trips, and then Wisconsin will be starting to get closer to locking in. I know this is not a question that we got in the mailbag, but I'll ask you to put your cap on. And I know there's two more practices down there that we'll be able to see, and maybe that things will change before get back to Madison. But do you expect by the time you get back to Madison for the first practice that the first team quarterback will be settled?
I think the staff better have an idea. Now, on Tuesday, will we see someone going with the ones? I guess I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Maybe they use part of that week too. But at that point, you would have presumably multiple scrimmages and ample film to be able to make a determination. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do. I'm just going to keep saying no until we see something different.
If they haven't, is that a sign of concern?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this is a very intentional process. Obviously, both of them have shown good things. I've gotten a lot of questions about that as well. What does it say about this program or this offense or Tyler Van Dyke that we are deep into week 2 and he hasn't taken all the 1 reps? I think this is, you can look at it either way. I think this is good from a competition standpoint, from the standpoint of if something does happen to either guy, there would have been enough reps for everyone around them to feel comfortable with either guy. But someone's going to emerge, and they're going to make that decision here, presumably in the next week or so.
So this kind of goes into that question, and I now have to find it because I wasn't expecting to talk about exactly that. But it was a question about if Chris says if it is going to be Tyler Van Dyke, and he seems to have taken full control of the quarterback 1 reps, why should fans be comfortable with Locke as QB2? He has poor arm strength. And again, these are his words. I don't necessarily agree with everything that's going to be said here. He's got poor arm strength, tons of batted balls, and most importantly, lost to Indiana last year. Give us reasons why fans should have hope in Locke.
Well, I've said this on multiple occasions. He's a much better player than he was a year ago, and those were his first opportunities to play at the college level. That team last year had a bunch of issues. It wasn't just Braedyn Locke coming in off the bench, and we saw it in those losses against Indiana and Northwestern. Obviously, the intelligence that he has been there all along, but Phil Longo has said this, that he's just a much better quarterback from an execution standpoint. And I think he's been pretty solid this preseason. It's just that Van Dyke comes with 3 years of starting experience and a lot of other qualities that I think can lift this offense. But they're in a better spot this year in terms of who their number 2 will be than last year. And to me, it's not even close.
Okay. I'm not going to disagree with that. Again, I don't think the Indiana game is necessarily a fair barometer for him, just like the Iowa game probably wasn't either. But I do think Braedyn Locke is better. And when I say I don't agree with everything that was said there. He doesn't have like a howitzer of an arm, but it's not like he's got a pea shooter either. You know, it's not like he's Austin Confensis just throwing stuff up there. Dude's got an arm. He's got a D1 arm. I'll say that. Like he's got the ability to play at this level. It's just not on the same level as some of the other quarterbacks that certainly that Wisconsin is going to see, or even that are on the roster. Like I would say, I mean, I certainly think Tyler Van Dyke has a bigger arm, and we know that because obviously the coaching staff has told us, and we can see with our own eyes. But I don't know that he has zero arm strength is something fair to say.
Yeah, I mean he's capable of delivering every pass. He just has to do it in a little bit different way. He can't be late on a window because Van Dyke can do that and still get it there, and Locke might not be able to. But that doesn't mean that he can't have a lot of success. And again, it's easy to say, well, what we saw in games last year is representative of who Locke is going to be moving forward. He played 3.5 games. He was a redshirt freshman in a new system, in an unexpected situation. And I think the players around him are better, but he's improved a lot as well.
I mean, against Indiana, who were the running backs? Against that Iowa defense, not exactly fair. Illinois found some magic towards the end. The ball to Skylar Bell down the side of the field certainly stands out. Again, I feel like I'm going to bat for him. I'm not. I'm just saying, like, I don't know that when you think about him as a backup, it's a bad thing. Like he is I think he would be a solid number 2 quarterback for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. I'm sure there's some other quarterback ones here, but I want to go to running back because I like this one from Jaron. He says, you wake up tomorrow as Devin Spalding. Mm-hmm. How are you personally going to manage snap counts and carries between Ches, Tawee, Jackson Aker, and the freshman?
Assuming everybody is 100% and healthy, I think you've got to start with Ches and Tawee as the 1-2 punch. I think some of this, and we've seen this in previous seasons, if one guy is starting to get hot, you can ride him a little bit more. I mean, my expectation would be, I don't know if it's 50-50 exactly. Maybe they rotate series, but we're obviously, based on what we've seen, going to see multiple running backs on the field at the same time. And that can provide opportunity for some of those young guys. And Jackson, to me, can serve as a lead blocker in some of those running back sets. If you need him to push the pile forward, he can. On the other hand, that's kind of what Walker seems like he's for too. But I also think you have to get at least one of those freshmen on the field, and maybe both. They're just so dynamic, and you're not in a position where you want to sit and wait on guys who could then potentially become unhappy if those guys, you believe they're ready to contribute right now. And I mean, Dylan Jones continues to impress me more and more. Every time he touches the ball, he does it in a different way from Dupree. He's less of a, like, split him out wide and get him in space kind of guy. Not that he can't do that, but like, he runs like a veteran. And so I think you sprinkle those guys in some capacity, and if they are doing really well, you use them a little bit more. But I think you got to go into this season open-minded, knowing how talented you have, how much talent you have with those freshman running backs.
Evan asks this, and I think this is obviously a question about Ches Malusi and durability, but he said, who ends up with more touches this season, Ches Malusi or Walker?
At this point, I'm inclined to say Walker. Maybe that's not fair. And I think I got asked a question about this too for my mailbag as well, just about what Ches is going through right now. And based on the conversation that we had with him, he said he had been dealing with some type of cramping. Everybody wanted to be smart. He could go if he absolutely needed to. And I understand that. I think we use his past history against him now, whether that's fair or not. I mean, because what's happening now is not related to the season-ending injuries he suffered before. At the same time, that is part of his story right now. And so it's hard to think that, like, yes, they all hope this will be the year he gets through the full season and doesn't get dinged up, but you just can't count on that right now. And Walker has been so powerful and so consistent since the spring that I'm inclined to say he ends up with more carries and presumably more touches, though I would expect it to be close if both are healthy.
What do you think about when it comes to some of the other backs? If Ches isn't healthy, obviously the question, I don't think it's even a question, right? Because
Yeah.
it could end up being Jackson Aker getting more touches as well if Ches isn't healthy, obviously. But
Yeah, because when Ches has been held out of the contact drills, we saw it was Joey Walker and Jackson Aker getting 1 reps. That's basically been the top two without Malusi. Now we've gotten a chance to see Cade Giacomelli, obviously, and then Dupree and Jones working with the twos. So they have some options, and they're in a better position if somebody does get hurt than they were a year ago. But obviously, an injury at the top changes everything in terms of carry distribution.
And I also think it's going to change throughout the season too. If guys are not ready to go August 30th, they could be ready to go October 5th, right? So we've certainly seen that in the past, more so in the defensive backfield. I'm thinking about like a Rashad Wildgoose who may not have been ready to go early in his career, but then as the season went along, Jim Leonard felt more and more comfortable and ready to throw him in. I think that certainly could be the case at running back too, even though I think running back is certainly easier to play early than defensive back. Gotten this question a ton. I think we answered the other day, but we'll answer it here again. Alex asks, any under center formations that you've seen at practice?
0 so far. They're rolling with the offense that Phil Longo has installed, and that seems to be what they're going to do consistently. And I think what they should do, if you're going to do one thing, then just do it really well.
That was my whole thing last year. Like, don't be who you aren't. That's not who you are. And if it is who you want to be, then you got to actually practice it. And I'm sure they obviously were practicing stuff under center when we weren't there. Didn't see a ton of it, obviously, in fall camp. Haven't seen a ton of it in fall camp here today. Maybe they're spending the entire day Friday working on stuff under center. I don't know. But be who you are. Like, that's not who you are anymore. Not saying that they shouldn't do stuff under center, but that's just not who they are. And it's kind of like throwing Wisconsin basketball into zone defense because they're getting, like that's not who they are. They'll play it here and there, but that's not who they are. They've been a man defense, and that's what they're going to be. You have an identity, and that identity is not a ton of stuff under center for Wisconsin, even in goal line and other short yardage situations. Matt says, is Fort Green's ceiling play style similar to Caesar Williams?
Wow. I know Caesar had a really good. I mean, what did he have? 3 interceptions in a game or something? Multiple.
No, I mean he was really good his first senior year, which was 2019. Had a great game against Minnesota, going up against 2 NFL wide receivers, Rashad Bateman and Johnson. So he had a really, really good game against Minnesota. I remember that. And he had a really good season overall, but he came back, and I don't know that 2020 was the year that anybody wanted to have. So I think play style, yes, they're both really, really big. They're both really, really big for corners, right? Like 6'1", 6'2". I think Fort Greene is a little bit more free in the hips. I think he's got a little bit more of that to his game. But if you remember, Caesar Williams got a chance in the NFL. Like he got, I think you would call it a cup of coffee in the NFL. But yeah, I think their play style, just because their size is similar, but I like Fort Green's ceiling. I mean, if he plays at 2019 level Caesar Williams, I think they'd take that in a second. But I think he's got even a little bit more to him.
Yeah, it's a hard comp to make, but my sense was I think the ceiling is higher with Fort Greene just because of we haven't seen the best of him at all at Wisconsin, which we've talked about multiple times. He's only had 1 year here, but he was obviously a standout at the Division II level. He's more comfortable, more confident. He's put on 20-plus pounds. I mean, he had to have a rib removed 2 Mays ago because he was dealing with that thoracic outlet syndrome, and they were worried about the possibility of blood clots. Like, his best is yet to come in my mind. And I also think, I don't know if the offenses will view it this way, but you're looking at the other side, and Ricardo Hallman's coming off a year where he had 7 interceptions. I realize his body type is much different, and maybe they just feel like, hey, we got a big body and we'll try and take advantage of him. But you got to go pick a side. And Fort Greene, to me, at least at the college level, at the FBS level, is less proven. So I think he'll get some more opportunities. And if he takes advantage of them with his size and ability, he could put himself in position for the pros. I don't think that's unrealistic.
Physically, he's got it. And he's actually the exact type of cornerback that Wisconsin loves to have too, being that size and having that speed and the weight that he's put on and still being able to run the way that he is. I like the ceiling. John asks, how has the snapping looked? That was a main problem with the offense. He said the main problem with the offense last year.
I have to say, the fact we haven't discussed this at all through 2 weeks of fall camp says a lot. It's been really good. With the ones, like I have not counted instances where the ball was with the ones. I've counted some instances with the reserves where the ball went right over maybe Mattire's head, but you don't expect necessarily to see those guys playing and lining up against Iowa unless you've had some injuries. Jake Renfro's been very solid in my mind as a snapper. It gets out quick. It allows the offense to be more efficient, and that's certainly good news for this offense.
Agreed. Captain Luke, let's go back to the passing game here. Based on what you've seen in camp, is there any reason to believe the passing attack will look different this year? We saw Wisconsin be able to stretch the field against LSU, but will that be able to be carried over to the season with Tyler Van Dyke?
I still have a lot of questions about that. This is the point of camp where, and I had a lot of questions about this in the mailbag too. It's very easy for me to say all these guys are improved. Look, if you're still on the team and you were here a year ago and you're not improved, what is anybody doing here? But that may not necessarily translate into these dominant type of performances against other teams who also have guys who have improved significantly. So I don't know. I do think Bryson Green, based on what we've seen, certainly on the outside has played like the guy. May not necessarily be the burner, may not be the right word. Like he has a bigger body, but he can go up and get the 50-50 balls. He can create separation. He can catch between multiple defenders. That has consistently stood out. Who's going to be able to help him on the outside? I still wonder what that's going to look like in a game. Obviously, Vinny Anthony is in that mix. CJ Williams, who has had some really nice moments, looks like he's in a better position to be more consistent. Quincy Burrows, I mean, even like Tyrell Henry and Chris Brooks Jr. have gotten some run. But we're talking about a bunch of guys that, if you're just talking statistically to this point in their college careers, have not put up big time numbers outside of Bryson Green. And I'm sort of in a wait and see mode about that.
Yeah. The reason I feel better about the passing game is because they have multiple guys. It's not just Will Pauling, right?
Yeah.
Like last year, it was kind of, and Luke's talked about that this preseason, and they don't want him to have the number of catches he had last year. If they do, they may not be the team that they want to be, because then you're forcing the ball to him. But I feel better about, certainly, obviously, Tretch being a part of this offense changes the passing game for me. And then also another year of Will Pauling in this offense. And I will say, where they were holding him out a little bit earlier in camp, the last few days when he's been able to be out there, he just makes a huge difference. Like, just having him out there makes a huge difference, and figuring out a way to put him and Tretch on the field at the same time. I got that question at some point. I don't know if it was part of this, but someone was like, is there any chance that Will or Tretch could move outside? I think Will's the more likely of the two to be able to move outside and play outside, but I don't know that that's where they're at this point, to get them on the field at the same time. I think they're just going to just have 4 wide receivers instead of 3 when they're going to be on the field together.
Yeah. Obviously, if I throw in the slot receivers, there's more reason for optimism with this group in general. I guess I took the question more to mean about some of those guys on the outside, but I would venture to guess the top 3 receivers this year will be Will Pauling, Bryson Green, and I would put Tretch Kekahuna in there just because I think he's going to get a ton of snaps. Obviously, Longo loves the slot receivers, and if it's Pauling and Tretch out there at the same time, you're going to have to figure out who you're going to give a little more space to, and Pauling's coming off a 74 catch season. So I think Tretch can take advantage of those opportunities. So if it doesn't mean you have to have 50 receptions for the guys on the outside, but they've got to be able to do enough to stretch this field and keep defenses honest, obviously.
And here's the thing. Like, I don't know that you're going to be able to play a ton of man against either of those guys. Like, there are some slot cornerbacks that will be able to deal with that, but I don't know that you're going to have multiple slots to be able to deal if you're going to play man. But that's obviously why there's a lot of zone in the middle of the field and more man on the outside. But we saw what Tretch did in the bowl game, and it's not like Will Pauling didn't play. right? Like he had a really good game too, had a couple of touchdowns, or excuse me, had the one touchdown and another big gain. I think them on the field together has a chance to be really, really special. Staying with the wide receivers here, and I'm going to need you to take a pill that makes you not be able to think about anything that you've thought about before about this team. Like you have no knowledge of this team whatsoever other than fall camp. And in that sense, this Miami Rising asks this question: where would you rank Chris Brooks Jr. against the other outside receivers based on watching fall camp? If you knew nothing about the depth chart and nothing about what they've done before.
What a question. I'd still put him behind most of the guys who have gotten the majority of the reps. It's hard because even if I'm basing it strictly on what I'm seeing this preseason, he hasn't taken any of the reps with the ones. He's gotten more with the twos. And so that tells you where the coaching staff is looking at the pecking order right now.
I forgot this part of the question. You had no idea what the first, second, or third team reps were.
Look, the physical talent is obvious. But I don't know that I've seen a ton of moments where he said, hey, that was Chris Brooks who just made that big catch. They've thrown to him a handful of times. Hasn't always been successful, whether it's because the ball wasn't in the area where it needed to be. But I think I've seen other wide receivers make more big plays this preseason, and sometimes that's how you can tell who's flashing. But look, if he's healthy, the physicality that he provides can be a little bit different. And I certainly wouldn't rule out him having an opportunity to get some reps. It's just that there are so many bodies in that room right now and guys that have a lot more experience at this point.
I mean, let's be fair about it. Prior knowledge helps him here. You know what I mean? Like our prior knowledge of Chris Brooks helps him here. So taking that out of it, that means we can't include what he did last spring, in the spring of 23, where he was off to a fantastic start before getting injured. So I don't know that you want to throw that stuff and not that knowledge out, because that's kind of where that's where my mind still is with him. He's got that ability. And there were a great catch, I think, that I mentioned on the show the other day, where it's a one-handed catch with a guy holding on his right side in these one-on-ones that they were doing. He also had a catch that moved the sticks in team drills. But yeah, I don't think you want us to forget the spring of 2023, because then I don't really have anything on Chris Brooks at all. But physically, certainly right where you would want to be, and why a lot of people think maybe you could move him to tight end or something like I did in college football. How is
By the way, should we take a break here? Who's your leading receiver on the NCAA game right now?
The all-time leading receiver in Wisconsin history is also my all-time leading receiver right now. The fake history of Wisconsin. His name is Nate White. And
you had the foresight to move him there before.
I did. Well, yes, he's still a running back, but I line him up at wide receiver. So I didn't. But you line him up in the slot, run him on the little crosser. He's unstoppable. He's got over like 5,000 yards receiving in his career. It's insane. I don't think anybody needs to hear about that. But Nate White, remember the name, wide receiver Nate White. We've seen him get he's got a tough transition. That's a tough transition that he's making here in the middle of camp. I know that when we talked to Kenny Guyton, he goes, I'm going to work my butt off for him and do everything I can for him. As far as I can tell, they had him working in the slot, but again, it's a very difficult transition. You can't just plug a guy in that has like the 93 or 94 speed on college football, which is the only thing that matters in my mind. Can't just do that in real life, which is unfortunate. Brendan Fanning asks, how has Tucker Ashcraft looked as a run blocker?
No.
That's a tough one.
I don't know how much time I've spent evaluating him as a run blocker. I do know that on Van Dyke's longest run of this preseason, which would have been a 60-plus yard touchdown run, Ashcraft was the one out in front throwing the block. So he's got that skill set and that talent. And I mean, I'll be surprised if he's not their best tight end this season. Maybe that's not saying a ton. Obviously, they still have Riley Nowakowski here, but from a production standpoint, you need to find other ways to get guys the ball, and he certainly looks like one who can help them.
They see the talent there. It's why he played as a true freshman. He's He's got the talent. It's just the injury limited him last year, and then limited him in the spring. We didn't get to see him very much in the spring, but I think he's had a solid fall camp. They believe he is their best all-around tight end at this point. So if they believe that his run blocking is up to par. Now we'll see exactly how that all plays out. But I think the most interesting thing is how we talk about how deep the wide receiver room is, how those numbers are. How do you deal with that with the tight ends? Because Phil, while he loves slot receivers, he also loves a tight end that can be productive in the pass game. And when he has that, he'll feature them. So is Tucker Ashcraft there? Is Riley Nokowski there? Is fill in next guy here type of stuff? Can Jackson McGowan be that pass catching tight end that they want in this offense? So far in camp, I don't know that we've seen that, but it's one of those things to keep watching here as we get closer to the season for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Ashcraft to me is the one who has stood out the most as a pass catcher, but
for sure
they're still they're in a similar spot that they've been in at that position group, I feel like, for several years, where you're just not sure whether there's going to be enough consistent productivity, which is why you're going to have to lean on your strengths, and running back, wide receiver. Those guys are going to get the ball a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Ferguson was obviously a huge focal point of the offense, and since he left after 21, they had flashes in 22 from Clay Cundiff before he got hurt, and Hayden Rucci was, I think he led the tight ends in catches last year.
10. I think.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to lead the group this year. So they have been searching for it, and the tight end in the run game and in the pass game, it just isn't as featured. But I think if you had the guy, Phil Longo would be more than happy to. We saw that at North Carolina for sure. Brendan goes on to ask, where would you put these cornerbacks in current pecking order? Jones Tuclona, Jace Arnold, Amari Snowden, Xavier Lucas, Emilio Agard, and Jay Harper.
Jace Arnold and Jonas Duclona are at the top. They are the ones who've gotten the most consistent reps. I think Arnold has really stood out to me this preseason. He's gotten a lot of reps, more so with the twos. I mean, we know who the one group are. Obviously, Ricardo Hallman, Nazir Fortgreen, when we're talking guys on the outside. The rest of them, I can't say we've seen a ton of. Xavier Lucas, we've seen flash in some of those one-on-one types of drills. Amari Snowden, I shouldn't say that. Amari Snowden's gotten a bunch of reps as well, including with the twos. He had a nice interception in the red zone on Braedyn Locke. I still think, there's room to go for him sometimes, especially like CJ Williams had a couple back-to-back reps where he really kind of took advantage of that inexperience. So of that entire group that you mentioned, those are the three that have gotten the most significant reps. I feel like I would put Arnold and Duclona maybe ahead of Snowden, though.
Yeah,
it's close. Like Snowden is getting a lot of those reps, and then after that, I just can't say we've seen a ton of those true freshman guys, but that also speaks to how deep that group is and how much talent there is, because they've brought in like 3-4 corners in the last couple classes.
Yeah, I mean, just think about what's ahead of them though, too, right? Like Ricardo Hallman coming off an All-American, All-Big Ten season. You got Nazir Fortgreen, who is the most improved guy in the team, according to Luke Fickell back in the spring. RJ Delancey, here as a senior, and then Max Lofi coming out of, you think about potential comeback players of the year. I mean, do you have to be a big time player before you can be a comeback player? I'm asking. I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know how that's decided. If you did not play and now you are playing, then I guess you're in the running.
Because Ches Malusi and who was the other guy from Wisconsin that's in that running? They listed there's a watch list for comeback player of the year, and now I'm forgetting the other guy that's on it. Ches Malusi was on it. And I'm going to have to think of the other guy here at some point. But when you think about the cornerback room, it's very old. In like the first and second teams are very old, or the first 4 guys are very old, and then the other guys are going to be the future of that spot. And so you're going to be seeing a ton of Duclona, a ton of Jace Arnold, Amari Snowden, and go on down the list of these guys. These are going to be the guys who are going to be on the field a bunch next year, assuming they all stay. I have to add that qualifier in there because you just never know with the transfer portal. But that's the future of the position, and I don't know that it's tough right now just because they're not getting a ton of reps against the best guys, and the threes are the threes for a reason, and then you don't get nearly as many reps. So, Agri Canadian man said last year they went back to mostly running 2-4-5 midseason on defense. Has the defense been practicing much of the 3-3-5 in fall camp?
We've seen a handful of opportunities where they've had 3 defensive linemen on the field. I think they're getting to things differently. I suppose is the best way to put it this preseason, and we saw it in the spring, given the number of linebackers that they have. But so I think there have been fewer instances where I'm trying to think about this. Fewer instances where there's like 6 DBs on the field because you have more talent up front, if that makes sense.
Are you trying to hold your tongue about exactly what you've seen here, or what? Scheme wise, you're trying to hold off on it?
Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I mean,
because
what's your take on this?
Because I think they're getting into the dollar in a different way than they were last year.
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like we've seen it a lot more, but they get into it differently so that it perhaps doesn't look like they're running that. I don't know if that's a fair way to describe it.
I think so. I mean, look, you've got to take advantage of your strengths, and we know how strong they went and got all those transfer linebackers. And so I think that the good thing for this defense is Mike Tressel has different ways to present some looks to the offense. I feel like they're better positioned to take advantage. And honestly, my sense is I feel better about this defense going into this season than I do about the offense in terms of what I think, what you can expect from them. Just because I feel like I still, and that's not to say I don't have questions about this defense. I have questions about everything because you don't know until you get to the game. It's just that they've been able to have a lot of success in a variety of ways, and that's got to be encouraging for the Badgers.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a lot. The way that we could see this play out is just not giving the offense the look that they're expecting and moving into something different. Being a little bit more versatile and the different looks that you're able to get to an offense on a down-to-down basis, and exactly what they can expect, I think is how we'll see. I think this play out, right? And if you think back to last year, the dollar package, it wasn't 3 defensive linemen. It was essentially 2 defensive linemen and an outside linebacker. Usually CJ gets, right? Like that's what the dollar ended up being. It wasn't always the 3-3-5 that we think of. We'll see. We'll see. They will, again, they're going to have an open practice tomorrow, and maybe they'll show some of this stuff, and we'll be able to talk about it a little bit more, but go hold off right now. Steve says, besides Ricardo Hallman, Hunter Wohler, and Will Pauling, who are some of the players you could see ending up first or second team All Big Ten? This is so tough. This is so tough because there's now 18 teams in this conference. Becoming a first or second team player in the Big Ten means you're like a first round pick, essentially, eventually, right? Like, just, it's insane some of the talent that is, first of all, in this conference to begin with, and to somehow earn a first or second team All Big Ten honor. It's going to be so tough.
I mean,
go ahead.
Did Hallman even earn? Was he third team? Now I'm trying to think.
He was a third team All American according to the Associated Press.
Was he a first team All Big Ten? I don't think
so. It doesn't matter. He's saying, like, just in terms of those potential guys that are potentially that. I don't recall exactly. He might have been via the AP, but the actual All Big Ten, like how the Big Ten puts it out with the coaches and media, maybe not.
Yeah. Man, that's hard. I would also say a year ago at this time, I thought Muma Jongmeta would be a first team All Big Ten performer. Now at the time, I'd like to say that sounded reasonable. He was coming off a 95 tackle season, and obviously that did not happen. But
it did not. I agree.
Hey, sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield. I mean, there's a handful of guys that I think can have really good seasons. Like, I mean, will the linebackers cancel each other out? Like Jake Chaney, I feel like could have a really good year, but Jaheim Thomas is going to get a lot of those tackles, I think. So I just don't know how many of those first, second team Big Ten type of guys there are, but you also kind of need that if you're going to have a team that is a contender when you get into November. So it's just hard to go down the list and say who it's going to be. Any offensive linemen?
Well, I'm like Ken Riley Mallman. I think Riley Mallman has that
It's hard
ability.
to judge on that. Like if they're getting 200 yards a game rushing, then it's very easy to say, well, we need to pick an offensive lineman. It's always so hard to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, look at Ricardo Hallman was a 13 pick in the Big Ten, according to the media. He was an honorable mention pick.
It's insane
by the coaches.
So that's why I'm hesitant to. I don't know. You have to do something really special to be first and second team All Big Ten.
Yeah, but again, a lot of this is also team success, though, right?
Yes.
Well, let's be fair. Team success and name recognition. And I would say going into last year, Ricardo Hallman did not have that name recognition. Now he does. Now it's going to be like, oh, okay, one of the best corners, in the Big Ten, Ricardo Hallman. Like that is how he's going to be viewed. Hunter Wohler going into last year had a little bit of it, but certainly has it more now. And he was a second team pick last year, according to the media and the coaches, I think maybe third team pick coaches. So like he's got the name recognition, but this conference is just absolutely stacked in talent that's going to be big time draft picks. So finding guys that could potentially be a first or second team is probably going to be tough. I think Will Pauling is a guy like, I know he was mentioned, so throw him out. That's tough, man. That's a tough question.
Even a defensive back like Will Johnson, dude from Michigan, he's back. You have Caleb Downs,
Denzel
Burke. Like you got to have to do something real special.
Like have 7 interceptions and lead the country.
Maybe 10.
You know what I mean? Like if that's not good enough to get you first team or, even any kind of mention whatsoever, that's tough. All right. Got some, going long here. Got a couple big picture questions real quickly here. I love this one from Badger Hugh. He says, who has the harder job? Barry, when he showed up from 1995, getting UW to 10 or 11 wins, or Fickell getting UW to 10, 11 wins here in the next 5 years?
Man, I think it's harder. Boy, that's a tough one because where Wisconsin was in 1990 was so awful. Yes. You had a lot farther to go. Wisconsin is not in that place now. On the other hand, the landscape it's way more difficult now to get to that level. I almost feel like it's harder to get to 10, 11 now. Is that blasphemous to say? Because
go ahead.
Yeah, the schedule is going to be challenging every single year with 5 or 6 legitimate playoff contenders. But obviously what Barry accomplished is unmatched in terms of like the improbability of it all. So from every perspective, the culture's perspective, the like stop, all the players are going to Iowa and Michigan and stuff like that. But it's easier to, I don't know. The other thing is it's easier to be a contender now because you don't have to win a Big Ten championship. I mean, they could go 9-3 and maybe a couple of those wins are, I mean, I don't know if it'll be what that would look like in a given year, but let's say you beat 2 top 10 teams and you're 9-3 with a couple other top 10 losses. You're in the mix now. And that just,
you're a playoff team.
Yeah. That just didn't happen 30 plus years ago. So there's arguments for both. But I feel like it's almost harder now, which is kind of insane to say.
I think it's tougher now, but there's also more ways to build your team.
Yeah.
You got the transfer portal. You can pay players. You have the name recognition of Wisconsin that people know what it is across the country. So you have the money behind it at Wisconsin, the willingness to not just go all in, but put your money behind that message. And in 1990, Barry did not have that. I mean, you've talked to him a ton about it. You did like you talked to everybody about it. You did the whole, what's it called? The
oral history.
Yeah. The oral history. Thank you. You know how difficult it was back then.
Yeah.
Like you had certain ways to build your team, and truly the only way to do it was to go out, recruit your butt off as hard as you possibly could, and keep guys home and try and change the narrative around Wisconsin, which had not had extended and really high level success in close to 30 years. So I think the idea around it is much, the starting point was more difficult, but I think Barry's talked about this. He's more proud of it, the fact that he was able to sustain it and turn not just it being a 1-year wonder, but into a program that has Luke Fickell wanting to actually come to Wisconsin. Like Luke Fickell is not, he's not leaving a mid-sized program that had been to a playoff or had a lot of success to come to Wisconsin in 1990. Like that would not have happened. What he did in 2022 would not have happened in 1990. Wisconsin's a different program. So turning around was such a beast of a job, but it's also a beast of a job to get Wisconsin to 10-11 because of the Big Ten, the way it is. You have 9 conference games. It's just, I think going forward, we're going to see, maybe it'll change because they already have these other Power 5 or Power 4 teams on their schedule. But why would you schedule some of these other Power 4 teams anymore when you have the schedule that Wisconsin's going to have in the Big Ten? Then again, you also want to have, like, one loss doesn't kill you like it used to, or 1 or 2 losses doesn't kill you like it used to. So maybe they'll continue to do it. I don't know. It's a tough question. If you're going to take Luke, I'll take Barry, just because I think it's very, very it's very, very close.
Yeah. I mean, Wisconsin is obviously closer to that level than they were 3 decades ago. And so maybe for that reason alone, you could say it's Barry, but like to get from where they are now to that next rung is very difficult. Now they've had 10-win seasons. I don't know. I'm so conflicted on this because there was a 12-team playoff going back to the BCS year. I think Wisconsin would have gotten in 7 times. On the other hand, this program hasn't even been close for 5 years. So I don't know.
Close with this one because it's kind of on the same level here. Big Ten and national media not high in the Badgers this year. Is that because they were overhyped last year and didn't deliver? Are the coaches and players happy that they don't have that bright light on them? Is the media sleeping on them this year?
It's always perception. Some of it has to do with what you think the level of talent is going to be. But I have to say it's largely based on last year being a flop when there was so much expectation going in, because nobody knows, especially on the outside who's not watching practice, nobody knows what this team is going to look like. They are a much more talented team in my mind. And you also look at the schedule, and historically, at least, if we're talking about the last 5 years, they haven't won a whole lot of those kinds of games that is going to get them to that next level. In terms of how the team views it, I don't think anybody cares. It might be easier to be off the radar a little bit, but that's only because you're not answering questions from us or maybe other regional or national media members about being really good this year. They're still going to go about their business either way. In some regards, it's easier to stay focused and locked in. I mean, how many times do you see a program that has great success and then they show up the next year and just expect to have it again? They're very hungry to have that success. It's been a while since they have. So I don't know that it's that big of a deal from that perspective.
The overhyped aspect of this, we heard Luke Fickell at Big Ten Media Days say when he was asked about the hype of last year that they are trying to drop back in a little bit. Are they not? Would you agree with that? Like he did say that, and I certainly, based on some of what I've seen and in talking to people, that's the case. That has certainly been the case where they've tried to reel it back in and not be over the top, like we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and having people talk about how great everything is and how great everybody is, and it has been pulled back in a little bit.
Yes, I think there was a lot of swagger and bravado coming in here because they had come off a bunch of success at Cincinnati, done something unprecedented, led a group of 5 team to the college football playoff, never happened before. And you had more resources. Wisconsin was this name brand, and people thought that they understood what it was going to be like. And whatever they did in the offseason didn't translate to the wins. And that's the bottom line. That's what it comes down to, what your record is during those 12 regular season games. And so it was very humbling. And I talked to Luke about this. Luke has shared this in the offseason that he learned a lot. But I think one of those things that you learn is just put in the work and go grind. And talking season is not all that important.
Let the talent, let the results take care of the talk. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's not like Luke was out there saying all these things, but I think, certainly he and everyone else wasn't necessarily deflecting from that at the time, and that's important to point out as well.
They weren't tamping it down by any stretch. I lied. One more, just because you said talent across the board is better. Of the 22 starting offensive and defensive positions, where might they be worse off compared to last year?
What a question.
That from Miami Rising.
I wonder about quarterback. I like it's a gamble. On the high end, it is something that leads this team to a potential special season. I mean, right? If Van Dyke is the player that he was 3 years ago and puts up those kinds of numbers, but it's a big if.
Give me a healthy Tanner Mordecai, and I would take him over what they have at quarterback this year.
Yeah, that's a tough question, and we've gotten that a lot too. I imagine is how does Tyler Van Dyke compare to Tanner Mordecai? And it's a really hard question to answer because they're different quarterbacks under different situations. But Mordecai brought an awful lot to the table, and what would that have looked like if he came this year? I don't know. Beyond that, I mean, I think they're better at most positions. Like Joe Brunner coming in at guard, I'll take that all day. And if you have to slide Joe Huber over. Tanner Bortolini was is NFL draft pick with the Colts and was an incredible blocker. And I think Renfro is going to have to prove that he can be that kind of guy as a blocker at this level. We've had a lot of talk about the snaps perspective. But on the whole, I think it would take me a while to find a spot where I would say that they are worse. And I don't want that to be confused for me saying that I'm getting on the hype train and this team's going to go 11-1. Because I mentioned this in my mailbag too. Objectively, I think they are a far more talented team this year, but everybody else is getting better too. So you can be better and still go 8-4 or 7-5.
Yes, you can, but it has to look different. It has to look like it can't look like it did last year. You can't have, if you go 7-6 or 7-5 and it looks like last year, you are not going in the right direction. The things that happened last year, because the schedule is different and because it's more difficult, like going 7-5, but cleaning up all the areas that were, I think, an embarrassment for Luke Fickell at times with some of the stuff that happened, whether it was, penalties or things not being set up right, or just a lot of things that you could probably throw in there and say, that was not the level of football that we need to play. If those things are fixed and you still go that way, I think that's completely fine because you're pointed in the right direction. If they look like they did last year, that's not in the right direction.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really going out there and saying it. And when I say I would take a healthy Tanner Mordecai over Tyler Van Dyke, that doesn't mean that I think Tyler Van Dyke is not good or can't lead Wisconsin. I just think what we saw from Mordecai in that bowl game is the type of player that he was, and the type of offense that they could have had everyone been healthy throughout the entire year and gotten to play against a horrible defense every week. No, I'm kidding. But some of the passes he made in that game were exactly what they needed to be, and we didn't see that all the time. But I thought he was really good against Minnesota as well. Like, he was starting. The rise was starting for Tanner Mordecai, and if that was the Tanner Mordecai you were going to get throughout the entire year, I think certainly, Phil Longo would take that in a second. That's not a knock on Tyler Van Dyke, but this is, I think what Tanner Mordecai brought to the team, leadership wise, legs wise, and just experience wise, it'd be hard to say I want Tyler Van Dyke, who has not played at the level he's wanted to the last couple of years, over Mordecai. But again, that doesn't mean I don't think he can figure it out and get back to what he was in 2021. It's just where my mind's at right now. All right, Wisconsin back on the field tomorrow. I should say they're on the field Friday, but they're going to be back on the field tomorrow morning for their open practice, and then they'll close things out on Sunday down in Platteville with another scrimmage. And we'll be back to talk about it. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.